I'll never forget October 7th, 2023. I awoke to repeated messages coming from my family's WhatsApp group, the Siegel clan. Hamas attacked Israel. Rockets, gunshots, fires, killings, lootings on Kibbutz Kfar Aza, all over. A lot of destruction in the south. I was shaken, stunned. My heart was pounding. Messages said Keith and Aviva were in their safe room. They were okay, but don't call them. I sent lots of messages that day to Keith and Aviva, but I got no response. My daughter Emily told me she'd been messaging with her cousin who was in his safe room on the kibbutz, but then he stopped responding. Throughout Saturday, I kept checking, looking for messages, but there was no news from my family in Israel. Late Saturday night, I sent final messages to Keith, to Aviva, and to my nephew saying, I love you. Naively, I thought I'd awaken to a message from Keith the next morning saying they're okay. That didn't happen. My brother Lee called late in the morning and said a neighbor of Keith and Aviva's saw them being taken by gunpoint by Hamas terrorists in Keith's work car over to Gaza. It was awful. I had a pit in my stomach. It's really actually hard to find words to describe how it felt that day. Also on that day, those of us who live in the US, we quickly mobilized and contacted everyone we knew working in and having contacts with the Biden administration. I knew I had to shield my mother from learning about what had happened. I contacted the administrator of the Cedars, where my mother was living, and explained the situation and requested that no one discuss Israel, the war, or anyone in my family with her. I also asked that the TVs be kept off all stations that included news, talk shows, etc. It's remarkable they adhered to my request from that day until 14 months later when my mother died. I remain internally grateful for all the staff at the Cedars. I also sent a message to the rabbi to inform him about Keith and Aviva. He called and he introduced me to one of the most exceptional humans I have ever met, Sophia Chitlick, and I don't know if Sophia's here. There are no words to express my gratitude to Sophia, her compassion, her wisdom, and political knowledge and connections. She scheduled and participated in strategic meetings with Emily and me on Capitol Hill, and to this day, Sophia keeps in touch. By November, we'd probably spoken with more than 160 members of Congress. Our approach was one of respect, articulating the facts and listening to everyone we met, independent of ideology. Members and staff were shaken, concerned, and asking us what could they do. The advocacy and meetings continued until Keith was released. It was a dark, difficult, emotional time for myself and everyone in my family. I realized for myself that the one thing I could do was use my voice to advocate for Keith, Aviva, and all hostages to get them home safely. It wasn't a role I ever imagined, but I spoke at rallies, universities, as a member of Israeli delegations in DC and North Carolina. Anything that was asked of me, I did. For my brother, my sister-in-law, and all the hostages. It was profoundly difficult to repeatedly tell my story It was a challenge to eat, sleep, but I strived to keep a routine, and I never lost hope that Keith and Aviva would get home alive. I refused to go to a dark and hopeless place. The stress was palpable. It was unclear what each day would bring me. Shortly after October 7th, my family began to work with Mickey Bergman, a Nobel Prize nominee and the CEO of the Richardson Center. He's been responsible for the negotiations of many famous American hostages, such as Paul Whelan, Brittany Griner, Dan Fenster, and Trevor Reed. Mickey and his organization don't accept any money from any families with whom he works. It's an extraordinary individual, and we are also profoundly grateful to Mickey and his team. The families of dual American Israeli hostages quickly became an informal group. We were in regular contact. We shared information. We attended meetings together with top officials in the US and Israel. We shared a common goal: get our loved ones home. Meanwhile, during every visit with my mother, I had to remain upbeat and not indicate my section or concern. After Aviva was released from nearly 2 months of captivity, we learned about the horrors she and Keith endured. Shortly thereafter, Aviva was in DC, meeting with top officials. She was a tireless advocate, traveling the globe, speaking out and testifying to get Keith, her husband, released. I admire Aviva's strength and fortitude. It was an intense roller coaster over the 15 months that Keith was held hostage. Several times we thought Keith would be released. It was actually on my birthday we got the phone call that Keith's name was on the list to be released. My knees buckled and I cried with joy. I got up at 4 o'clock on February 1st because I wanted to witness Keith's release. That day, the miracle happened and Keith was released. We arrived in Israel on February 3rd. It was very special, and I'm sure you can imagine how emotional it was when I first saw Keith and we embraced. During that visit, my nephew asked if we wanted to go to Kfar Aza to witness the atrocities, and of course we did. That day, what we saw, there are no words to describe the horror of what Kfar Aza looked like. Keith defines what it means to be a survivor. He dug deep into his inner strength. He sought inner calm to help him endure terror, humiliation, physical and psychological abuse. He suffered from lack of food, water, and physical activity. He probably lost 50 pounds. He said he feared for his life every day. I'm sorry. He was moved 33 times and was alone for 6 of the 15 months, including the last 2 months of captivity. He was usually moved at night. Keith was kept in a locked, tiny, darkened room, laying on a mattress day and night with 3 guards. Keith's account and memory of being abducted and in captivity for 484 days are astounding. He created a daily regimen that included imaginary conversations with his family and friends, and he started each day with a conversation with our mother. In his mind, he kept track of the day of the week, day of the month, year, and how many days he'd been held in captivity. There was no electricity, but some places where he was taken, they had bottled gas and or solar panels on the ceilings. on the buildings to charge the radio and if there was a TV. It was only on day 205 that Keith learned that his son was alive. He and Aviva had thought he had been murdered during the attack on Kfar Aza. Keith heard an interview with one of his daughters while a guard listened to an Arabic radio station broadcasting it. His son was actually rescued from his safe room on Kfar Aza by the Israeli army. To the very end, Hamas exercised psychological control. At the release site, guards held Keith's arms and told him to wave and smile at the very large crowd. There were many people filming Keith. When walking back to the van to be transferred to the Red Cross vehicle, Keith kept looking to the sky. He had not seen it in many months. Keith and Aviva's youngest child was engaged shortly before October 7th, but she and her fiance decided they'd only get married after Keith and Aviva were back home. The wedding was scheduled for June 20th, but due to the war with Iran, it was postponed. I'd flown early to Israel for the wedding and was actually prioritized and evacuated by a U.S. Air Force cargo plane with State Department staff and Eden Alexander and his mom. It was a very intense experience on top of everything else I had gone through over the last several months. The wedding did happen on August 3rd, and happily, my daughter Emily was able to go to the wedding, and she represented all of us who live in the U.S. Thankfully, Keith is getting stronger. Almost immediately after Keith's release, he asked what could he do to help get every hostage home. He knows the atrocities and the fragility of the living hostages and feels he must share his story, although it's profoundly painful. Keith was quickly speaking locally and internationally. Since Keith's release from Gaza, he and Aviva have made 4 trips to the U.S., speaking out to get every hostage home. He's actually in New York right now. He spoke yesterday at 4 synagogues and is speaking today at a church and a synagogue. That's my brother. Keith and Aviva's strength and determination are extraordinary. It's a tribute to their values and the kind, gentle, and compassionate human beings they are. We strive for a day when people can live in a peaceful environment and in harmony with others, even those with whom we have differing opinions. Keith and Aviva will be coming here for our mother's unveiling, and I hope that we will see you all there, and also on Sunday for the pancake breakfast that's being organized by Hal, Hunter, and Sandy, very dear friends of my mother's and our entire family. Thank you for listening.